Emily Parker set her scratched badge on the oak table and said nothing. 3 years. 18 executives watched her walk out. Then Daniel Sterling, a billionaire CEO, stood up and ran. Through the glass corridor past 41 floors of staring employees. He caught her at the elevator. She turned, looked at him, and smiled. The doors closed. Inside her worn briefcase was a child's crayon drawing of an office drawn by someone who had never been allowed to see it. 5 months later, she would walk into another room like that one with no job, no company, and no money left. She would carry that drawing and one sheet of paper she had signed herself on her last day that nobody had asked her to sign. That sheet of paper was going to end a career in front of 11 witnesses. The alarm went off at 4:45, and Emily Parker caught it before the second ring. She had trained herself for that. A second ring might wake the small person asleep down the hall. In the kitchen, she filled a cup with milk and set it on the refrigerator shelf where a 7-year-old could reach without climbing. She wrote a note in block letters and pinned it to the door with a magnet. Lunch is in the blue bag. Mrs. Elliott comes at 7:30. I love you more than anything in this world. Then she stood in the doorway of her daughter's room and allowed herself exactly 1 minute. Any longer, and she would not have gone. By 5:30, she was on the 41st floor of the Sterling Global Tower, and the lights came on section by section as she walked following her down the corridor like something loyal. Ray at the security desk had stopped asking why she came in before the sun. 2 years ago, he had decided she was going through a divorce, and she had let him keep the theory. In the bottom drawer of her desk sat a bottle of chemical relaxer and a bottle of antacids side by side for 3 years. She used the first every 6 weeks. She had started the week of her interview standing in a drugstore aisle at 11 at night, running the arithmetic on what a room of strangers would decide about her in the first 4 seconds. She had never stopped. The antacids she used more often than that. Her desk was clean, cleaner than anyone's on the floor. Todd Brennan had a wife and 2 boys in a silver frame and a Little League trophy that was not his. Rachel Byrne kept a corkboard of ticket stubs. The woman in procurement had a mug that said, "World's Okayest Mother." The head of regional operations for Sterling Global had a monitor, a keyboard, a legal pad, and nothing. People noticed. That was the point of it. They noticed the way you notice a tidy room, and then they stopped noticing, and then they built a story out of the empty space, and the story they built was the one she needed them to have. 3 years, and the legend of her was the kind nobody said out loud, because the people who owed her the most were the ones least able to admit it. There was a version of Emily Parker that lived in the group chats and the stairwells, and in that version, she was the one you called when the building was on fire, and the sprinklers had failed and the lawyers were already awake. When the Chicago cold storage line failed at 2 in the morning in July, it was Emily on the phone with a shift supervisor standing in a parka, walking him through a pressure relief schematic she knew by heart, keeping $4 million of vaccine from turning into medical waste before sunrise. When Meridian Health Supply had 1 foot out the door over a spoilage report, she rebuilt the numbers in 9 days, and Meridian stayed 2 more years before taking the whole network in-house and shaking hands on the way out. The corporation's damaged goods protocol was hers, every line of it, and her name was on none of it. She did the work of 2 people, some quarters 3. Her region cleared 99.1% on-time delivery and held spoilage at 0.3%, and those 2 numbers were the reason the Sterling Global sales deck had a page in it at all. On a Tuesday in operations, she laid out what was going wrong in the cold chain and where and what it would cost by the 3rd quarter. The table looked at her with mild patience. 40 seconds later, Todd Brennan leaned forward and said very nearly the same thing in a louder voice, and Daniel Sterling pointed his pen at him and told him that was good thinking. Emily wrote it down and moved to the next item. Daniel was not lying. He had heard the idea from Todd. That was the whole of the trouble. In March, a partner named Holloway came in for the quarterly review, and as Emily walked into the conference room, he handed her his empty cup and asked where the restroom was. She told him. She took the cup. Then she sat down at the head of the table and opened the meeting, and Holloway went a deep and lasting red, and she opened her laptop as though nothing had occurred at all. 3 times that same week, somebody called her Keisha. Keisha Brown worked in facilities 2 floors down, and the 2 women looked nothing alike beyond the obvious. Emily corrected the first one, she corrected the second. The 3rd time she simply nodded and kept walking because correcting people cost something, and she had a finite amount of it and every ounce of it was already spoken for. At 6 o'clock, she was at the curb outside the after-school program, and Naomi came out at a dead run with a paper flapping in her hand. "I made you something," the girl announced, and held it up against the car window before Emily could even unlock the door. It was drawn in crayon. A room with an enormous window and a blue sky in it. A desk. And on the desk, drawn very carefully in a little brown rectangle, a picture of a girl with 2 puffs of hair. "It's where you work," Naomi said. "I did the window big because you said it's high up." Emily held it with both hands. "Mommy," Naomi said, buckling herself in, "is my picture on your desk?" The light changed. Somebody behind them tapped a horn. "It is," Emily said. She did not put it on the refrigerator. She folded it once the way you fold something you intend to keep and slid it into her briefcase between the files, and it stayed there. At 9, with Naomi asleep, she opened the laptop again at the kitchen table and worked until 1. This was the other half of the day, the half nobody at Sterling Global knew existed. She had built her whole life in the hours on either side of her daughter. Her father had done the same thing in a bus garage on the night shift for 30 years. Marcus Parker had raised her alone with grease under his nails and a lunch pail he never let her carry, and one night when she came home shaking over a job that had paid her half of what it paid the boy beside her, he had wiped his hands on a rag and looked at her for a long moment. "They can pay you less than you're worth," he said, "but don't you ever let anybody else set your price." By August, the whole floor was saying the same word. The chief operating officer's chair had been empty since spring, and the funding round was coming, and everybody knew what everybody knew. Rachel Burns said it to Emily's face in the elevator with 3 other people listening, which was very much Rachel's style. "If they don't give it to you," Rachel said, "I'm walking out the same day." Emily told her not to say things like that where the door's open. But that night at the kitchen table, she did something she had not permitted herself in 3 years. She opened a second window and did the math. The raise would cover the school 6 minutes from the apartment, the one with the yard and the afternoon program that ran until 6:30. No more Mrs. Elliott. No more the crosstown bus at 7:20 in the morning with a 7-year-old asleep against her arm. She let herself hold that for about 90 seconds. She got as far as imagining the walk. Naomi on the inside of the sidewalk, the 2 of them going slow because there was no bus to catch and no reason on earth to hurry. Then she closed the window and went back to the spoilage figures because hope was expensive and she was not in a position to carry much of it. The announcement came on a Thursday in the big room with 18 people around the oak table. Daniel Sterling said the name Vanessa Cole. Vanessa had been with the company 8 months. She stood up in a beautiful gray suit and said something gracious and brief and perfectly weighted, and the room applauded, and nobody looked at Emily, which was how Emily knew that everybody was looking at Emily. And Vanessa Cole, for 1 second, looked at Emily too. It was not triumph. It was closer to the face of someone who has been handed a set of keys and has just understood standing there in front of everyone that she does not know what the car is. Emily waited until the applause ended. Then she asked in an ordinary voice if she might ask why. Daniel did her the courtesy of answering honestly in front of all of them, and that was the cruelest thing he did all day. "The COO is the face of this company to the people who fund it," he said. "We open around next quarter. Emily, you are the backbone of this building. I can't pull you out of operations, the whole system comes down. And I'll be straight with you because you've earned straight. We have held 36 partner dinners in 3 years, and you have not come to one of them. Not one. Vanessa has been in rooms you've never walked into." There was an answer. It was 7 years old and asleep in a bed across town, and it was the one thing in the world Emily Parker could not say in that room because she had spent 3 years making certain none of them knew it existed. She had taken her own daughter out of her own life to be seen as somebody who was serious. And now the absence she had manufactured was being read back to her as a verdict in a kind voice by a man who thought he was being fair. Nobody at that table felt they had done anything wrong. The list of requirements contained not one word about her skin and not one word about a child. It had simply been written by people who had never once had to be somewhere at 6 o'clock. Emily unclipped her badge. She set it on the oak, and the scratch across the face of it caught the light, and she said nothing at all. Then Daniel Sterling stood up and ran. He ran through the glass corridor in front of 41 floors of people who would talk about it for a year, and he caught her at the elevator with his hand on the door. "Emily, whatever it is, name it." "I can be poor, Mr. Sterling," she said, "but my daughter needs a mother who can hold her head up." His hand came off the door as though the metal had gone hot. "Your daughter..." He had chased her down a corridor in front of his entire company. He had never once in 3 years known that she had a child. She stepped in and turned around and looked at him, and she smiled, and the doors closed before he could ask the second question. Some desks are very clean because the person sitting at them has quietly carried a piece of her own life out of the room. We teach our children to work hard enough to be accepted. Maybe there is one more thing worth teaching them. If being accepted costs you the thing you love most, no salary on earth is covering that bill. She came back the next morning. Nobody expected that. A woman who quits on a Thursday does not walk through security on a Friday at 7 and ride up to 41 with her briefcase, and Ray looked at her for a long moment before he let her through. She spent 6 hours on it. Every file she had ever touched listed by name and location. Every vendor login transferred. Every one of the 900 pages of the damaged goods protocol indexed so that whoever came after her would not have to guess. She sat in a conference room with a lawyer named Douglas Whitfield and a systems administrator from the 11th floor, and the three of them went down the inventory line by line, and Whitfield initialed each page as it cleared. At 5:42, the administrator killed her credentials, and the log recorded it to the second. Emily signed. Whitfield signed under her. The administrator signed under him. Then Whitfield made 3 copies because that was the procedure, and handed her one because she was a party to it. Rachel Byrne watched the whole thing from her desk with her hand over her mouth. Emily did not look up. She had not done any of it for Sterling Global. Marcus Parker's daughter did not leave a mess behind her for somebody else to find, and that was all it was. She put the copy in a folder at the back of a drawer at home and did not think about it again for 4 months. Hartwell and Sons Consulting had 14 employees, a copier that jammed on anything heavier than 20-pound stock, and a lease it had renewed twice at terms Gerald Hartwell would not discuss. It paid Emily 40% of what Sterling Global had paid her. She took it in an afternoon. The hours were 8:30 to 5:30, and the building sat 6 minutes from Naomi's school, and those 2 facts laid end to end were worth more to her than everything Daniel Sterling had ever put in her account. They did not want her there. Not at first. She heard it the way you always hear it in fragments through a wall. A woman shows up unemployed from a tower job with no reference letter and a story that does not add up, and the fragments arrange themselves into the shape people find easiest to hold. She got lucky over there. Somebody carried her. You know how those places are now, they have to hit a number. There was a woman in billing named Dorothy who had been at Hartwell 19 years, and in Emily's first week, Dorothy asked her pleasantly in front of 4 people at the coffee machine whether the big firms had put her through some kind of program. Emily said that they had not. Dorothy said that was a shame, because she'd heard those programs were very good now. Emily did not argue with any of it. Arguing was a thing you did when you had time. She cleaned out the supply room herself on a Saturday alone and threw away 200 pounds of paper that had been sitting there since Gerald's father ran the place. She learned every birthday in the office and she put them in her own calendar and not the company's. She sat with the account manager who cried in the parking lot on Thursdays and found out it was because he had been given a client he was not trained for and had been too frightened to say so for 11 months. She rebuilt the intake process in 3 weeks. Nobody thanked her. That was fine. She had never once been thanked at Sterling Global either, and at Sterling Global she had not been home for dinner. On her second day, she took a framed photograph of Naomi out of her bag and set it on the corner of her desk. Nobody asked about it. Nobody said one word. She sat there for a while and looked at it. The Friday of her 3rd week, Naomi came to the office. There was no reason for it and no crisis behind it. The after-school program was closed for a teacher day, and Emily said, "Come with me," and that was all, and it was the first sentence of its kind in the child's life. Naomi discovered the spinning chair within 90 seconds. She rode it until she was green. Gerald Hartwell came out of his office with a butterscotch candy in his hand and crouched down with an old man's care and introduced himself formally as though she were a client, and Naomi shook his hand and told him she was 7.5. At 4 o'clock, she was drawing on the back of an expired expense report with her legs swinging. "This isn't like my picture," she said, meaning the crayon room with the enormous window. "There's no sky?" Emily said no, there wasn't. "I like it better," Naomi said, and went back to drawing. At 5:30, they walked out together, and Naomi held her hand all the way to the car and told her about every single person she had met in order with their jobs. 2 floors of a converted warehouse with bad light and a jamming copier, and Emily Parker stood in the middle of it with a cup of terrible coffee and understood that she had just had the best day of her working life. It was the last easy day either of them would have for a while, though neither of them knew it, and that is generally how those days work. Across town, the thing she had built for 3 years began very quietly to come apart. It did not blow up. Systems like that never do. Sterling Global's cold chain had run at 99.1% on time and 0.3% spoilage, and everyone in the building had believed those were properties of the company the way a wall is a property of a house. They were not. They were a woman getting up at 4:45. Nobody was patching the July valve failures now. Nobody was on the phone at 2 in the morning with a supervisor in a parka. The gaps that Emily had closed silently for 3 years closed so silently that no one had ever known they were gaps, opened one after another, and each one took a week to find and a month to feel. By October, spoilage was running at 4.1%. 4.1% of a cold chain is not a statistic. It is a hospital group in Ohio opening a case of insulin at the wrong temperature. It is a phone call from a client's counsel. Sterling Global took 3 of those calls that month, and not one of them came from Meridian because Meridian had walked its own network out the door 2 years earlier and had no idea what was happening inside that building. The funding round wobbled. And the board, which had been perfectly happy with Vanessa Cole in a gray suit at a dinner, began instead to ask her about temperature logs. Daniel Sterling noticed it the way a man notices weather. He came in one morning in November and found 4 people in a conference room at 7 doing badly and loudly what one woman had done silently at 5:30, and he stood in the doorway with his coat still on and did not go in. He had not slept especially well since August. He had told himself a number of reasonable things, that she had been emotional, that she had thrown away a career over a title, that people who walk out are telling you something about themselves. The reasonable things had held up for about 6 weeks. What was left after that was a single word she had said at an elevator, and the memory of himself sprinting past his own employees in his own building after a woman he had apparently never met. Vanessa Cole had 11 months of tenure and a chair the whole building had watched her be handed. She needed a win, and she needed it before the round. Meridian Health Supply put out a tender in November. Regional, mid-sized. Operational restructuring for a cold storage network that had been humiliated once already that year and did not intend to be humiliated twice. Vanessa Cole worked on the bid document herself at night alone. Section 4 wanted demonstrated performance. She looked at what the system was actually doing, and then she went back through the quarters until she found one that was clean, and the last clean one was April. Through June, the last full quarter, Emily Parker had run start to finish. The gap between those two things was the gap where Vanessa's career lived. She typed on-time delivery 99.1%, spoilage 0.3%. Every character of it was true. Sterling Global had achieved those numbers. She did not write the quarter they belonged to because Section 4 did not ask for the quarter, and she told herself that all night in those words, Section 4 does not ask for the quarter. Her hand was not steady on the mouse. She sat there with the cursor over the button for a long time. Then she sent it and went to the window and stood there with her arms crossed until the sky went gray. In December, Meridian shortlisted 3 firms: Sterling Global, a national outfit out of Dallas, and Hartwell & Sons. Gerald came out of his office holding the email at arm's length, like a man who needed glasses he was too proud to buy, and read it out loud twice, and then went and got a bottle of something from a cabinet that had not been opened since his father died. There were no clean glasses. They used coffee cups. Dorothy from billing poured the first one and put it in Emily's hand and did not say anything at all, and that was the apology, and both of them knew it, and neither of them mentioned it then or ever. 40 miles away, Vanessa Cole read the same list twice. If Emily Parker walked into that room, the room would ask her one question, and the whole thing would fall down. Not because Emily would attack her, because Emily would simply be there, and Ruth Delgado at Meridian would look at Emily and then look at the number in Section 4 and start doing arithmetic. So Vanessa built the only structure that could hold her weight. She did not invent it in a fit of malice. She assembled it the way frightened people assemble things out of pieces that were lying around and almost fit. There had been a collapse. Collapses have causes. Emily Parker had left the week before the numbers began to turn. Emily Parker had spent 6 hours in a conference room with the entire file system open in front of her. Emily Parker was now at a firm bidding against them. Say it in that order, and it is not a lie. It is a theory. And the theory had one feature that made it irresistible, which was that if it was true, none of what happened was Vanessa Cole's fault. By the second week of December, 3 partners had heard that Emily Parker walked out of Sterling Global with confidential material in her bag. Rachel Byrne called at 11 at night. Emily took it in the hallway with the door half shut so it would not wake Naomi. "They're bidding your numbers," Rachel said. Her voice was going fast and high. "Section 4. It's the second quarter, Emily. April to June. It's yours. It's the last one you ran, and they're selling it like it's happening right now. I have the originals. I have the whole temperature series I can send you, the Rachel." Emily put her back against the wall. "Don't send me anything." There was noise on the line, the sound of somebody starting 3 sentences. "Not one file," Emily said. "Not one page, not a screenshot, not a number typed out in a text message. Do you hear me? They are going to bury you with a lie." "I know." "Then let me. If you send me 1 byte of Sterling Global's data," Emily said, "then the lie becomes true, and I will have handed it to them myself." Rachel was quiet, and then she said in a smaller voice that she was sorry she had not walked out in August the way she said she would. She had student loans. Her mother's medication ran $400 a month. She had said a brave thing in an elevator, and then she had not done it, and it had been sitting on her chest since. Emily told her that nobody who says a brave thing in an elevator owes anybody anything, and that she should go to bed and that she was not to call again about this. Then she hung up and stood in her own dark hallway. She had just refused the only weapon on the table. She stood there long enough for the heat to click off. Somewhere in a drawer in the next room was a folder with her name signed at the bottom of every page of it, and she did not think of that folder once, because a person who is drowning does not think about the thing she filed away 4 months ago out of nothing but habit and pride. She knew exactly what she had done. It would be months before anyone else did. They spoke to each other exactly once after August, and it was not arranged. Meridian ran a pre-bid site walk in the second week of December, and the parking structure underneath it was half empty, and the 2 women came out of the elevator 4 minutes apart and found their cars 10 feet from each other. Vanessa spoke first over the roof of a silver sedan, and what came out of her was not what Emily had braced for. "You think I won?" Emily said nothing, so Vanessa kept going, and it came out of her in one piece the way something does when it has been rehearsed for 8 months against a bathroom mirror at midnight. "They didn't hire me because I'm good. They hired me because I look like the thing they want to show a room full of men with money. Do you know what every one of my last 3 interviews called me? Polished, not sharp, not right, polished. They put me in a chair this whole building knew I couldn't reach, and then they went back to their offices to watch. And the day I fall, not one of them will be surprised because not one of them ever expected anything else." She stopped. Her breath showed in the cold. "And then there's you," Vanessa said. "You're the proof. You walk into a room and you are the living proof that I didn't earn it. So one of us has to disappear. I'm sorry. What other road did I have?" Emily looked at her across 10 feet of concrete for a while. "You had one," she said. "You just didn't like the price of it." She got in her car and drove to pick up her daughter. She thought about it the whole way. She thought about it at the red light on 9th, and what she could not put down was that the woman in the parking structure had been right about nearly everything and had drawn exactly one wrong conclusion from it, and that the wrong conclusion was going to cost them both. The letter came on a Tuesday on sterling global letterhead, 2 pages extremely polite. Gerald Hartwell held it with both hands at the end of the conference table and could not put it down. "I'm 63 years old," he said. "My father built this. He built it out of a garage with 2 typewriters. Emily, I have 14 people. I can't fight a company that has a floor of lawyers. I don't have anything to fight them with." He asked her to withdraw from the Meridian bid. He did not look at her when he asked. He looked at the letter, and his thumb went back and forth over the corner of it, and Emily understood that he was not a coward so much as a man who had inherited something he had never been strong enough to carry and had been waiting 30 years for someone to notice. Around the office, the temperature changed in a day. People stopped putting their heads in her doorway. The account manager who had cried in the parking lot went out of his way to be somewhere else. And one afternoon, through the wall, in a voice that was not even trying to be quiet, somebody said what everybody had been thinking since August, which was that they had told each other about her from the beginning. When a person without power climbs on nothing but merit, the people above her do not need her to fail. They need her to be wrong. Because if she is right, then every decision made before her has to be opened up and looked at again, the promotion, the dinner list, the 20 years of it. And nobody willingly opens a drawer they have spent that long nailing shut. At 2 in the morning on the 20th of December, Emily Parker sat at her kitchen table with the letter in front of her. Beside it, a bank statement. At 40% of a sterling salary with no bid and no bonus, she had 5 weeks. On the refrigerator, under a magnet spring tuition. She did the arithmetic 4 times the way you do when you are hoping the numbers are as tired as you are. 5 weeks. Then the rent, and then nothing at all. And then a conversation she had already started rehearsing in which she would explain to a 7-year-old what was happening in words a 7-year-old could carry. She put her face in her hands and something came loose in her that had been screwed down for 3 years. "They can pay you less than you're worth," she said out loud to her father's kitchen to a bus garage that had been torn down in 2009. "But don't you ever let anybody else set your price." It was nothing. It was a bumper sticker. She had done exactly what he told her. She had walked out with her head up and she had refused the file and she had not argued with a single whisper, and here she was at 2 in the morning with 5 weeks in the bank. "Daddy," she said, "I did it your way. Why am I still sitting here?" Naomi was in the doorway. She had never seen her mother cry. Not once in her whole life. She came across the linoleum in her socks and climbed onto the chair beside her and sat there very close, and she did not ask what was wrong because she was too young to know that you were supposed to. "Mommy," Naomi said, and her voice was thick with sleep. "You said Grandpa said not to let anybody else set your price." She rubbed her eye with the heel of her hand. "You say it every night. You said it last night." And then because she was 7, And because 7-year-olds ask the question that everybody else in the room has agreed not to ask, are you letting somebody set your price? Emily Parker lifted her head. At 9 o'clock the next morning, she walked into Gerald Hartwell's office and put a single sheet of paper on his desk. "You won't be sued," she said. "There's nothing to sue. As of 9 o'clock this morning, I don't work here." He came around the desk after her. He was still saying her name when she reached the stairs. 5 weeks before the biggest room she would ever walk into, Emily Parker had no company, no salary, no lawyer, and nobody standing behind her. She had a name. That was the entire inventory. Courage is not measured in calm water. It is measured by what you refuse to pick up while you are drowning. And sometimes, the one who gets you back on your feet is not the strongest person in the room. It is the smallest one handing you back the words you gave her. Gerald Hartwell withdrew his firm from the Meridian bid the same week, which left a slot open on the schedule, and on the 23rd of December, Emily Parker called Ruth Delgado at Meridian Health Supply and asked for 20 minutes of it. She did not explain herself. She said she was no longer with Hartwell and Sons, that she represented nobody at all, and that she was asking for the 20 minutes as a person and not as a company. Ruth Delgado said yes before Emily finished the sentence. 5 years earlier, Meridian had been 9 days from walking away from Sterling Global over a spoilage report, and somebody had rebuilt that report from the floor up and had never sent an invoice for the hours. Ruth Delgado had never forgotten the name on it, because it was the only page in that whole relationship that had ever carried a name at all. The bid was set for the 28th of January. 5 weeks and 2 days from the morning, she had put a sheet of paper on Gerald Hartwell's desk, which meant that by the arithmetic she had done 4 times at a kitchen table in December, she would walk into that room 2 days after the money ran out. She was aware of this. She went anyway. On the morning of the 28th, Emily stood in front of her bathroom mirror. The bottle of relaxer was in the bottom drawer of a desk on the 41st floor of a building she no longer had a badge for. She had left it there in August next to the antacids, and she had not bought another one, and 5 months of her own hair had come in since then, and this was the first morning it had ever occurred to her that this was a decision and not an oversight. She looked at herself for a long time. Somewhere behind her, faintly, a drugstore aisle at 11 at night, and a 31-year-old doing arithmetic on 4 seconds. She did not straighten it. Naomi appeared in the doorway with one sock on. "Your hair's pretty," the girl said. "I know," Emily said. At 9:40 that morning, Emily Parker walked into the Meridian conference room holding her daughter's hand. There was a waiting area outside with chairs and a water cooler. She went past it. She brought Naomi through the door with her, pulled out a chair at the back of the room, and set her down in it with a coloring book. Ruth Delgado's eyebrows went up about 1/4 of an inch. Down the table, a man from Meridian's finance group looked at Vanessa Cole as though inviting her to say something, and Vanessa did not. "My daughter," Emily said. "Naomi. She's 7. Nobody spoke. Naomi, who had been briefed in the car and had taken the briefing extremely seriously, raised one hand about 4 inches and put it down again. "For 3 years at Sterling Global I hid her," Emily said. "Not from you. From everyone. I never put her picture on my desk. I let people believe I stayed late because I had nothing to go home to. I was very good at it. It was the single best piece of work I did over there." She set her briefcase on the table. "I'm not doing it anymore. If that costs me points with this committee, I'd rather you take them off now before I waste 20 minutes of your morning." At the back of the room, in the last chair against the wall, Daniel Sterling had gone the color of paper. He had come himself and had not told anyone why, including himself. He had been sitting there with his coat folded over his knees for 11 minutes, and in the space of 1 sentence, he understood the 36 dinners and the elevator and the empty desk, and the reason a woman he had called the backbone of his building had never once been in a room he considered important. Vanessa Cole did what she had come to do, and she did it first, before Emily could begin her presentation, which was the correct tactic and the last one she had. She said with regret in her voice that the committee should be aware of an active matter involving Ms. Parker's departure from Sterling Global, that confidential operational material was involved, and that counsel had been engaged. Emily did not raise her voice. She opened the briefcase and took out one sheet of paper and laid it in the middle of the table where anybody could reach it. "This is page 1 of my exit handover," she said. "I made it the day after I quit. Nobody asked me to. It lists every file I touched in 3 years and where I put it back. It's initialed on every page by Douglas Whitfield in Sterling's legal department and countersigned by their systems administrator. My credentials were terminated at 5:42 that afternoon, and their own log has the timestamp." She turned the page around so it faced Ruth. "I'm a signatory. I'm entitled to my copy. And if anyone in this room doubts a word of it, don't call me. Call Sterling Global's legal department. Mr. Whitfield's signature is on the line under mine." Vanessa Cole said nothing at all. "That's the accusation dealt with," Emily said. "Now I'd like to ask the committee for one thing, and then I'll present." Ruth Delgado told her to go ahead. "I'm not accusing anyone of anything," Emily said. "I have no documents and I've asked for none. I'm only going to make a request." She looked down the table at Ruth and nowhere else. Section 4 of Sterling Global's bid states on-time delivery at 99.1% and spoilage at 0.3%. I'd like you to ask them for the 4th quarter, last October through December. Independently audited, and it closed 4 weeks ago, so it exists. She let that sit for a moment. "That's the first full quarter after I left the building. I'm not asking for mine. I'm asking for theirs." The room went very quiet. "If it still says 0.3%, Emily said, "I'll withdraw from this process, walk out that door, and never contact your company again." Nobody moved. Ruth Delgado looked at Vanessa. Vanessa looked at the water glass in front of her and did not pick it up and did not answer. At the back of the room, Daniel Sterling opened his laptop. Nobody had asked him to. He was not on the agenda. He typed for perhaps 40 seconds, while 11 people sat there listening to him type, and what he was doing was the thing he had not done in 5 months, which was ask a question he did not already have a comfortable answer for. The number on his screen was 4.1%. He read it twice the way you read something that is about you. Then he stood up, and his voice when it came did not sound like a man who owned anything. "I'll confirm it for you, Ms. Delgado. The figures in Section 4 of our bid are from the 2nd quarter of last year, April through June. Our audited 4th quarter is 4.1%. Sterling Global withdraws from this tender." The finance man from Meridian said something. Daniel did not hear him. "And Ms. Cole is no longer an officer of this company," he said. "As of right now in front of you, so that there's no question later about when I knew. Vanessa, leave the folder." She stood, and she set the folder down on the table with steady hands, and she got all the way to the door before she stopped. She did not turn around. She set it to the wood. "You put me in that chair, Mr. Sterling. You knew what I could do, and you knew what I couldn't, and you sat me in it anyway because you needed a face for a funding round. So don't stand there in front of these people being a good man." She went out. She was not wrong. Everyone in the room knew she was not wrong, including Daniel, and that was the part he would carry. Then Emily Parker gave the only presentation of her life that she had not rehearsed. She had no slides. She had a legal pad. She told them about a Tuesday in July and a supervisor in a parka standing in a Chicago freezer at 2 in the morning, and about the pressure relief valve on line 3 and why it failed every July and only every July, and why no one in a conference room would ever find it because you could not find it in a report. You could only find it standing at -18 degrees with your hand on a pipe. She named 3 failures in Meridian's own network before anybody had told her about any of them: a dock that loaded in the wrong order, a night crew running a door protocol written for a smaller building, a sensor placement that had been correct in 1998. She had never seen their data. She simply knew what a cold chain does when nobody has walked it. Meridian had put one criterion above all the others in bold on the first page of the tender demonstrated hands-on operational experience. Every firm on the short list had answered it with a page of credentials. Emily answered it by telling them what was wrong with their loading dock. Ruth Delgado listened for 19 minutes without writing anything down. When it was over, she took her glasses off. "Ms. Parker, who do you represent?" "Nobody, ma'am," Emily said. "Not since Tuesday." Ruth Delgado looked at her for a moment. "Then I'll sign with that name," she said. The man from Meridian's finance group cleared his throat. He was not unkind about it. He was simply correct, which was worse. Procurement could not issue a contract to a natural person. There had to be an entity liability cover a tax identification number, and none of it was Ruth Delgado's to waive, because Ruth Delgado did not own Meridian Health Supply either. "Is there a firm, Ms. Parker?" Ruth asked. "Any firm at all." Emily Parker stood at the head of a table she had just won and had nothing to put on it. She had never asked anybody for anything. Not her father, who would have given her his hands if she had. Not Daniel Sterling in 3 years. She had built an entire life on the principle that if she carried all of it herself, nobody could ever hand her a bill for it. And the principle had brought her here with the win in her hand and no way to hold it. She asked Ruth Delgado for 5 minutes and the use of a telephone. In the corridor, with Naomi holding onto the back of her jacket, she scrolled to a number she had not answered in 5 weeks. 4 missed calls sat under it. 1 a week. The last one was 9 days old. Gerald Hartwell picked up on the second ring. She got about 11 words out. "I'm in a room at Meridian and I don't have a company. I need—" And she stopped, because the next word was one she had not said out loud to another human being in 34 years. "Help! Gerald, I need help." There was a sound on the line like an old man sitting down. "I framed it," he said. "Their letter. Did you know that 5 weeks ago? I put it in a frame on my wall and I look at it every single morning, and every single morning I think about a woman who quit her job so that I wouldn't have to be brave." His voice came apart in the middle of it, and he kept going anyway. "Tell them Hartwell and Sons. Tell them right now before they change their minds. I'll drive the paperwork over myself. Emily, I'll drive it over in my pajamas." She went back into the room and told them. Daniel Sterling caught her in the lobby. He came across the marble too fast the way he had come down the glass corridor in August, and he stopped a few feet short of her, and Emily stood with her briefcase in one hand and her daughter's hand in the other and waited. "3 times the salary," he said. "The chair, the title. Emily, I was wrong. I swear to God I didn't know you had a— You didn't know because I didn't dare let you know." She said it without heat. "That's the part you should be afraid of, Mr. Sterling. For 3 years I felt safer pretending I didn't have a daughter. Nobody made me do that. Your building just made it obvious." He had nothing. He stood there in his good coat with nothing at all, a man who had run the length of a building twice in one lifetime and had still arrived after the doors closed. Emily let go of Naomi's hand long enough to reach into her briefcase, and what she came out with was a business card printed the night before at a copy shop on 9th for $11, still faintly smeared along one edge. There was a name on it and a phone number. Nothing else. There was nothing else to put. "You don't need to hire me," she said and held it out. "You need to retain me. My rates go out Monday." Daniel took the card. He looked at it as though there were more of it somewhere. "My father fixed city buses on the night shift for 30 years, Emily said. "He told me one thing, and I've said it to that little girl every night of her life. They can pay you less than you're worth. But don't you ever let anybody else set your price." She put her briefcase down and pressed the elevator button. "For 3 years I let you set mine. That's on me. It ends today." The doors opened. She picked up her bag and took her daughter inside and turned around, and this time it was Emily Parker's hand that held the door and Daniel Sterling standing in the lobby with an $11 business card, and the doors closed when she decided they would. Gerald spent the next 9 days offering her everything he had in the wrong shape. A title, a raise, a corner office with a window that opened. She told him no every time. She was not coming back as an employee, not at any salary he could name, not ever again for anyone. 2 weeks later, a sign company took down the old lettering above the door of a converted warehouse and put up new. Hartwell and Parker Operations. Meridian Health Supply signed in February. In May, Sterling Global became a client of Hartwell and Parker on terms Emily wrote herself, and Daniel Sterling sat on the other side of the table for the first time in his life and did not enjoy it and paid the invoice inside of 10 days every quarter for years. He also did two things that never made a press release. He rewrote the job description for Chief Operating Officer and struck the line about presence at partner functions outside business hours. And he had 5 years of promotion decisions pulled and audited by people from outside the building, and when the report came back, he read all of it twice and did not show it to anyone. In June, Hartwell and Parker hired its first new employee. Emily did not post the job anywhere. She made one phone call. Rachel Byrne handed in her notice at Sterling Global on a Tuesday, 11 months later than she had promised to, in an elevator with 3 people listening, and this time nobody had to say anything brave at all. She just went downstairs and got in her car. In August, a year to the month from the day a badge went down on an oak table, Vanessa Cole sent an email. 2 lines. You were right. I wasn't enough for it. But they knew that before I did. Emily read it at her desk. She did not answer it. She did not delete it either. That summer, Naomi stood on the sidewalk under the new sign with her head all the way back. Is that our name? Read it, her mother said. The girl sounded it out the way you do at 8, slowly, one piece at a time, and got to the end of it. Parker. That's right, Emily said. That's yours too. In September, on the first morning of the new school year, there was no alarm at 4:45, no cup of milk on a low shelf, no note in block letters on a refrigerator door, no crosstown bus at 7:20 with a child asleep against her arm. There was a sidewalk 6 minutes long and a mother and a daughter walking it, and the daughter was on the inside the way she had always been, and they went slowly because there was nothing to catch and no reason on earth to hurry. Upstairs on her desk beside a photograph of a girl with 2 puffs of hair in a frame that had cost more than the drawing paper ever would stood a crayon room with an enormous window and a blue sky in it, and a desk, and on the desk, drawn very carefully in a little brown rectangle, a picture of a child. That drawing was framed not because it was beautiful, but because in the end it had turned out to be accurate. Some things you only have to refuse to sell, and one day they find their own way to the right address. And the largest gift a mother can hand her daughter is sometimes a very small one, letting the child stand on a sidewalk and read her own name off a door and know whose hands put it up there.